Hey there, Erin. So, since you made a screencast for the class, I was inspired and thought I would go ahead and make a screencast response for you. And I'll try not to keep this more than a few minutes. Um, but I just wanted to address some of the really awesome points that you brought up in your post. The first thing I'll say, though, is that so far I was able to read Parisa, Lori, and your posts, and I'm just really inspired, I guess, by the positivity and the growth mindset that everybody has. I really wasn't sure what the tone of these posts would be. Maybe in my role as coach, I've been seeing more people who are panicked and uncertain. So to read about some of the excitement and the enthusiasm going on, coming from you and others, was just really helped me smile at the end of the day. So let me go ahead and just hit on some of the things you talked about. You mentioned having clear directions and scaffolding things in the order of activities. I think that's really important. Maybe that's one thing we can learn from this experience is that, in the classroom, we feel like we have the luxury of time and familiarity, and we don't have to cloud up students' cognitive space because we're there to clarify if they have questions, because we don't have as many opportunities to communicate with them online as a class. It becomes really important to be super clear with your instructions and your scaffolding and the order that you want them to work. And so I think that's an awesome takeaway, and that's something we can all bring with us forward as teachers, regardless of whether we're teaching online or face-to-face, just that need for clarity, and that just being really clear with students about the flow of the class. And we do things in this order for this reason. Eric and I have been teaching online for a really long time, and that became really clear to us that students need that clarity and that scaffolding laid out for them. I also thought you talked a little bit about your assessments changing and how it's not so much about the big project anymore that was worth 20%, but moving that weight to the process work that students are doing. I just really admire your flexibility there. I think that some people, maybe they're in that fear mode that Parisa's chart kind of referenced, where they feel like things have to be controlled and they have to be the way they were, and they're going to double down on making this project happen, whatever it takes. And I don't think that's the right approach right now. I think we have to be very fluid and flexible. And so I loved your examples of moving away from those projects and just giving students the credit for the formative work and the learning they're doing. I think I hear you saying, that the goal is that they just stay engaged and they keep learning. And so I think that's really great. You mentioned how clear it's becoming that they need to practice certain skills, maybe different skills in an online setting. And you talk specifically about the discussion board and how you're in there trying to model for students what an effective response looks like. I think students, they don't have those skills in place. And so when they're in online classes, they're often going to respond to a post with something really shallow, like "Great work, Samantha. I enjoyed reading your post," right? Or "I agree!" exclamation point. And our goal as teachers online often is to get students to really develop and to push the conversation forward. So it's not about just making a comment that ends the discussion, but how can they offer something for the original writer to think about or to dig into some more? How can they pose questions that other classmates then can come in and build on? And what's really hard about that is it's a skill, and it's not one that a lot of our students already have in place. And so I like that you were trying to model that skill for students. Okay, so you'll notice I'm laughing because I just had to pause because my office is the living room, or I'm sorry, the dining room. And so my family is all coming down to snack at this point. So apologize for the disruption, the joys of working from home. So anyways, what I was talking about was the need for practice. Yeah, so students don't know how to develop their responses in there, and that's something that a lot of online teachers will often complain about. And so I think if it's something that we value and we think is important in the class and that students need to do in order to get to the outcomes of the course, then it's a skill that we need to think about as an outcome in terms of how are we going to get them to practice it. And of course, we have no time this semester to be really intentional about that. But maybe if you're teaching in the future online, it's like, how do you hone that skill? You talked about modeling it. I think that's great. I don't think that students seeing us, we're experts, and they see us model it once. That's not going to be enough. That's not really them. It's not the same as them practicing it. Maybe they can have an assignment where they analyze our response to a post, and we ask them to look at the different features of it. And then, we can ask them to start practicing those things. And I guess the hope would be that over the course of the semester, they would get better and better at learning that skill of how to respond. Maybe we would expect their responses to be pretty shallow in the beginning of the semester, but then as we move through the semester, we could help them build that skill set. The question of authority is a really good one, and I struggle with it too. Even in this discussion board right now, I question whether I should be posting or whether I should just be observing and seeing how everybody's interacting with each other. I think that's really hard. I do know that Eric Salhab has spent a great deal of time coaching people on how to use the discussion board and how to really promote learning in there. One thing Eric and I do is we have different kinds of discussion going on. We color code them. And in some of the discussions, one type of discussion, we are very present and we comment all the time. And then in a different kind of conversation, we kind of leave it to the students to sort of interact in that space. And so it might be worth reaching out to Eric and just getting some ideas on that, Erin. But it is a great question. Because you want to promote thinking and conversation. You don't want to shut it down as the authority figure. So something to continue thinking about. As far as the feedback, I love that you have more time to give feedback. And then that's something that really works for you because the feedback piece is something you thrive on. That's really awesome. In the active learning paradigm, the feedback piece is probably the most important component and where we spend most of our time as teachers. And so I love that you're finding enough time and even more time than you typically have to provide that feedback. One, I think, pitfall is that we have so many opportunities for feedback in the active learning design and also in the online platform that we can be overwhelmed with a sense of needing to provide feedback on everything and just feeling like we have to provide feedback on everything. And I found that what I really had to do as an online teacher using active learning in the classroom is I had to prioritize, okay, where does my feedback have the biggest return on investment? Because I could certainly comment on every single thing that they post on, every discussion, every activity, every draft that they turn in, but I've had to just kind of determine a few key places where my feedback is going to push their development toward the outcome the most. And so a lot of the stuff that I give students online is just they get points for completion. I may give them a sentence or two of encouragement, but I'm certainly not writing 3 paragraphs of feedback for lots and lots of assignments. And so I think I would encourage you to look at what those outstanding assignments are that you have for the rest of the semester and maybe decide where does my feedback contribute the most to their learning? Because we don't have to comment on everything. Learning's exhausting, totally exhausting. I'm learning 8th grade math and social studies, and it's exhausting. I would agree with you. And so I love that that's a very humble reminder for us to be empathizing with students. We think that our discipline is easy quite often, but that's because we've automatized so much of it. It's a nice reminder when we're having to do something new that it takes an enormous amount of patience and practice and trial and error. And so maybe it's a good learning lesson for all of us as we move forward with active learning that we really need to build in that trial and error and that practice time for our students as well. Thank you for the awesome affirmation at the end. I thought that was great. And I just also want to say, I may have said this at the beginning, but you're brand new to online teaching or teaching in an online modality, and you're using so many tools. And usually when somebody starts teaching online, it can take them several semesters before they're ready to make a screencast. So you should just give yourself a huge pat on the back because you're doing an enormous amount of learning. And that's really awesome. So thanks, Erin. Reach out to us if you have any other questions.